Hello and welcome to AgriFocus, brought to you by Agriland. I'm Stella Meehan and I'm joined today by Chair of the Group Irish Forest Owners, McCabe. Last week, Minister of State with responsibility for forestry, Healy-Rae, revealed that satellite data has shown that almost 24,000 hectares of forestry has been damaged as a result of Storm Éowyn in January. The worst affected areas were Connacht and the northwest, and overall around 10 million cubic metres of timber has been affected. Now, last week, Irish forest owners held a public meeting in Carrick-on-Shannon, County Leitrim, to discuss the aftermath of the storm damage and give advice to forest owners about what they should do next. McCabe, Agriland was at that meeting last week, and on the large screen, I suppose, in the room, the scale of the destruction was displayed and it was gut-wrenching. For those in farming who may not be involved in forestry, can you explain to them what happened?
Okay, well, I suppose to go back to the beginning, about 25, 30 years ago, a cohort of farmers, when it wasn't popular to do so, decided to plant land. They planted it for various reasons. For example, it could be that they had no heir to the farm. It just could be economic reasons. And they went out, as I say, when it wasn't popular, and they planted their land and they availed of the grants to do so. And they were pioneers, effectively, in forestry at that time. And they done everything that they were asked to do. There was regulations around planting, the types of trees, matching the type of soil. I'm in other aspects of farming, and I have to say it's probably one of the most compliant areas of farming that I've ever been involved in. And I think every forester, to a man or woman, wants to do the right thing by their forest and by the environment. So we adhere to all the rules, and subsequently we have had something come out of left field in the form of Storm Éowyn. And it has been devastating for a lot of forest owners that now find themselves in their 80s and mid-80s. They planted, as I say, for various reasons. One of those was an investment fund, pension fund. Could be for their nursing home, it could be for college fees. All of those reasons, and overnight that's wiped out. There's estimated close on €1 billion worth of timber on the forest floor. We have a very, very acute problem in the North Midlands. That's where the storm seems to have hit most. Nearly you can draw a line from Clare across to Dublin and north of that, or even a little Drogheda and north of that. You're talking Sligo, Leitrim, Cavan, Malin, it's just absolutely devastating. So those people now, it'd be wrong to say that their investments are completely wiped out, but what they have is a crop on the forest floor that's degrading as we speak. And the panic now is to get that timber off the forest floor and get it into the sawmills. So then what you're looking at, the estimate is around 10.5 million cubic metres of timber. That's about 3 years' annual supply to the mills. And, you don't have to be a genius to work out what's going to happen. It's a bit like the beef industry, which I'm involved in. When there's a supply, the factories manipulate prices and push them down. And I've no doubt that the sawmills will do that. And that's business. That's not an accusation against sawmills. They are part of this solution. They have to get rid of the product at the other end as well. So the supply chain is going to be under huge pressure at every juncture in this process.
So explain to people then what the biggest challenge is for them at the moment. There's forest owners out there with a huge amount of their forest fallen as a result of the storm damage. What do they do next? And what is, I know what you're going to say, but what is the big challenge at the moment?
Yeah. I think the big challenge is the lack of leadership in government. That has to be the single biggest one. We're almost 5 weeks into it now, and there hasn't been one tangible, tangible report, result, initiative from government on this. And there's a lot of very frightened people out there, in huge despair. There's distraught. I don't know whether you witnessed yourself at the meeting in Carrick-on-Shannon. Like, you'd old people, a couple coming in linked with each other, not knowing whether the forestry was down or not. And
it was heartbreaking. I mean,
absolutely,
the majority age group at that meeting, the last day was certainly probably 60 plus.
And sometimes initiatives by government don't always have to cost money. They don't have to put their head in the noose. But they do have to respond, and a bit of compassion. I think that's the word that's needed here, that is missing. Yes, I accept Michael Healy-Rae is only a wet week in the job, but at this stage we feel that he has been gotten to by his own mandarins at this stage. They're finding every reason not to do something rather than do it. And there has been lots of proposals put to them, and they have been very much sitting on the fence. So that's the first thing that needs to be done. The second thing is the Department have hung their hat on licensing.
The felling license,
felling
that
licence.
no matter, even if you have storm damaged property in the forestry,
Yeah.
you can't just take it away. You still need a license, even though it wasn't you that felled it, it was
That's
Mother
right.
Nature. But that's
And, very simply, why do you need a felling licence for something that's already felled? It's a very logical conclusion to come to.
well, they, I suppose, would argue this is coming from Europe, and you have to have checks and balances, I suppose, environmentally for this kind of thing. But I suppose the argument coming up from forest owners is that there are extraordinary circumstances sometimes where maybe you have to put the admin or the bureaucracy aside. So that's the argument on both sides.
Well, my call at that meeting was that this is a natural disaster, and force majeure kicks in all of those situations. And government have it within their power. They will hide behind the cloak of the European Union, but ultimately, forestry in this country is directed under the 2014 Forestry Act. And in that, government has all the powers there. And that's devolved. If you go to Europe and complain that the government are not doing something on forestry here, they will send you back to your own government and say, there's the act, they control the thing. But force majeure will circumvent all of that. And I think I said at the outset that we are a very compliant group of people, and we are put through the hoops on a lot of things. And in this situation, we believe that government should remove that need for felling. And the reason being that they're allowing anyone with a full felling licence and a thinning licence to go ahead. And they call that about 50% of the cohort of people that are affected. Now, they put their spin on it and they say that's great, all of these people can go ahead. But they omit to tell you that the other 50% don't have a licence. So they're going to put them through the ringer. And they'll talk about a fast turnaround. Now, we've been fighting with government for the last 5 years getting licences. And I don't have to remind you the debacle on licences in the last 5 years. Up to 5 years, delays in some cases to get a licence through. So you put those people through. Yeah, they're saying they'll turn them around in 2 months. 2 months is not good enough in this situation. And even if it was, they're opening all those people up to the appeals process that will take place. So the 2 months could easily be a year, easily. And those people then have, as I say, a decaying crop on the ground, and they're being discriminated on effectively. Last night we would have got word from Northern Ireland that they have circumvented their own laws there and allow people to take out their timber. So we will find people competing, the likes of Belfast is Northern Ireland. So the Northern Ireland trade will begin in there, the Southern trade will begin in there. Only those with felling licence are going to be able to mobilise their timber. And it's a very simple exercise by government that they could do there that would facilitate the industry. Yeah.
Because the bureaucracy here is going to have a very serious effect. It's not bureaucracy where there's no impact. You might as well consider forestry like a perishable. It's rotting. The minute it falls, it's going to rot, and the value has gone out of it. If you can't make it as, we'll say, sawmill lumber, that or eventually ends up as pulp or something like that, which is much less valuable. So there is actually a very serious time pressure here. And even with the best will in the world, if the forest department is able to turn around felling licenses in, they're saying maybe an average of 55 days, I'd be wholly optimistic if that were actually to happen. But if it did, still 55 days of timber rotting on the ground is of no good to these poor forest owners.
Absolutely. And meanwhile, those with their licences are stolen march and everyone else. If a harvester comes into my townland or my parish to cut timber, they're going to cut obviously with the people that have their felling licences and ready to go. When they pull out, and I'm one of those people that doesn't have a licence, I won't get that forest company back, a harvester company back in. And there's a whole logistics element around here that if proper coordination is in place, we can move into towns, counties, parishes and work through the backlog of timber that's there and not be doubling back on ourselves and creating all those logistic issues that would arise. We talk about all of the issues that are there, and you've mentioned about the decaying timber on the ground. The other big one there is the way we sell timber in this country. We sell timber as private owners by weight. Kilche have the privilege, and by the way, Kilche is a state organisation, state-backed, owned by the Minister for Finance and the Minister for Agriculture. And they're an organisation that have the privilege of being able to sell their timber by metre cubed. And the difference for us and them is that our timber is decaying, as you rightly say, in the wood. It's losing moisture. It could be perfectly saleable timber at the roadside, but it might have lost 15-20% moisture. We have to sell that by weight. It could still be perfectly good timber. So we're losing as we speak. Whereas Kilcha doesn't have that position.
Yeah, because the Quilcha, and as you mentioned there, state backed. I suppose what we mean by that is it's really backed by our exchequer, backed by the taxpayer, really. As you said, the difference is that when you go in, no more than if you were to go anywhere that has a weighbridge, like if you're going into bringing in metals somewhere or anything like that, you're determined on the weight of what you're bringing in. And there's two different playing fields here, which seems extraordinary in one way, Derek, doesn't it? There's one playing field for Quilcha, and their timber is measured by volume. And then there's another for just regular private forest owners, and theirs is by the weight of it. I mean, that seems very strange.
Not a bit, because another thing that personally I would have spoken about over the years was sharp practice within the industry, but among all the actors, forestry companies, all the supply chain. It's in their interest sometimes to bring trees to the timber to the forest road and leave it. Every week it's there, it's losing weight. So they're getting good timber in at less weight the longer they leave it there. So there is a manipulation, and we are always the price taker at the end of the supply chain when it comes to things like that. So there's people benefit from the fact that there is disparity between volume and weight.
And then in terms of just the sheer amount of timber that's going to come on the market, what has fallen from Storm Éowyn in January, and we're only into February of this year, is normally the amount of timber we'd have in this country for an entire year. So, a couple of questions for you.
Just a matter, it's actually about 2.5 years supply.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, it's a massive,
What do we do? I mean, we're a smallish country. Firstly, logistically, do we have enough capacity in sawmills? Do we have enough foresters? Do we have enough harvesters? Do we have enough logistics, companies? Do we have enough trucks?
Yes.
I mean, that's the first thing. The second thing is, with that amount of timber flooding the market, what's that going to do to price straight away? I mean, we know what it's going to do, and I hate to frighten forest owners, but we have to call a spade too.
I suppose, sometimes you have to go right back, turn it completely on its head. And from an IFO point of view, we're saying, look, on 2 years from now, we're going to need all of that land replanted. So who's actually looking out for the plants that need to go into the ground now to satisfy that demand? And believe it or not, that's almost a starting point in its way. The nurseries have no heads up on what's going to be required to go back into the ground. Are we going to put the same species back in? Is there going to be a whole rethink on what we do? Sometimes you have to, as I say, look right down the road before you even start. Secondly, there is an expectation that probably, and this is a guess, it's a best guesstimate, there could be about 20% of the land will never be cleared because of inaccessibility, because of the age cohort of people, the loss of interest. And that does no good to anybody to see rotten timber on the ground. And then when you have rotting timber on the ground, you have distressed trees which are harbour for disease. And that's something we don't want either in the industry, that the wider industry suffers there. Remember that forestry benefits every one of us in every aspect of our lives. The phrase, the lungs of the earth is our forestries. We benefit from the carbon, the environmental, the biodiversity, all of that. So it's in everybody's interest to get the trees out, get the timber used. We all benefit from the use of timber. Even the furniture we're sitting around here today comes from trees ultimately. And we benefit from the clean air, and we want to invest back in our forestries for a future generation. So that's the motivation here. Yes, there is a cohort of people that are at losses and all that, and we have to look at that as well. But the wider community is the beneficiary. So the trees on the ground and the rotting trees is one issue. We have 134 harvesting machines in the country because the industry has been run into the ground for the last 10 years. Stop, start. Because it has been in that, a lot of harvesting companies got rid of machines. Labour was a difficulty. They scaled their operations down to one-man operations in a lot of cases. So we don't have the capacity here to do that. The IFO are members of the Confederation of European Forestry Growers, and I put a call out last week to see what the supply of harvesting companies would be out there. Inundated is the word I would use. I still haven't got back to replying to all of the emails of offer that's there. So it's heartening to know that there is a capacity there that if we need it, we can call on it. But we have to also be careful about managing the supply chain, because if we doubled our harvesting capacity in the morning, the next thing is we'd have all that timber sitting on the mill door and they wouldn't have the capacity to do it. The expectation is that the mills probably have a capacity maybe of another 30 or 40%. They need to be incentivised. Very easy for government to give some tax breaks to them to up their capacity. That would help. We need to put storage yards in place for timber to backstore, basically, after it's cut in, and that has been done on the continent. There's models there to follow. You then move down further down the supply chain. Why not bring maybe some intervention program? If this was in beef or butter long ago, 25, 30 years ago, we had an intervention process where government stepped in and stored that material and trickled it onto the market without causing any major upset to the supply chain further down the line. That's a possible option. So there's tools there that can be exercised, but it's this 5 weeks in and this absence of any initiative that's creating that panic. So I see members now, they're frantic going to the mills, they're taking any price that they nearly will get. The mills are playing on that, and they're going to, they could actually incur a loss. By the time they replant their ground, they could incur a loss. A simple initiative that would steady the market, as I say, was that a simple regulation from government, just that all timber is sold by metre cubed, would really take the panic out of the situation. Because I, as a forest owner, then say, which is, there's no panic on me here. Even though my timber is losing weight, it's not losing condition. I'm going to, so it's an orderly process into the mills. And I think that's a big win straight away. The second one is, I would like to know, as a forest owner, an affected forest owner, that I can replant my land and that I get assistance to do that. And that's a big cost as well. And again, remember what I said at the outset? It's in everybody's interest that that land is replanted. And we do not want land abandonment. And that's a real issue. So the supply chain can be managed at various interventions by government. The other big one is, and we mentioned it in Carrick-on-Shannon the other day, we have a biomass facility below in the Midlands in Eden-Derry, Bordamona. Bordamona has a capacity of about 500,000 tonne a year. They're importing boatloads of chip from Central America. And I could never, for the life of me, understand that was ever happening in this country, but it's happening. Again, that's another semi-state. It's very simple to cut that out. That's 75 or 80,000 tonne of timber that we can supply for the next couple of years. And bearing in mind, the bulk of what's coming out of our woodlands will be just that. It'll be pulpwood. So again, a simple initiative there. I don't know the capacity in Eden-Derry, whether they can ramp it up or not, but I'm sure they can. And again, we all benefit from the carbon benefits of putting biomass into energy supply. So it's a win-win-win if government do it. And here's the key bit of all of that. Because this is a problem up north, there's a lot of capacity in the mills down south, and Eden-Derry is quite far removed from our part of the world. Put a simple transport subsidy in place. Even it out, that nobody incurs any extra cost no matter where they supply their timber from around the country. That gives a level playing field to everybody. Again, a very simple initiative that could be done. Another simple initiative that's there from government again. I know it's all the exchequer are on the rack for some of this, but sometimes they have to look at the bigger picture. Again, go back and see who benefits from the overall industry. When the downturn come in the economy, governments very skillfully implanted a charge on our forestry assets, i.e. they put universal social charge and PRSI on our income from our forestry. This was a crop that went into the ground 25 years ago that we were all heralded that it was a tax-free crop. Now, they'll tell you that's not tax, USC and PRSI, but it is. You can call it by any name you want. And that was a burden on the industry over those years. Now it's time to step up to the plate, remove the USC and the PRSI from the sale of timber, certainly for this current period. And that would give the benefit of anywhere between 11 and 15% benefit to the sale of our crop. And I think that's a small gesture. By the way, there's precedent for that. And the precedent is they brought a piece of legislation in for bog compensation. All the owners that were removed off their bogs, they got compensation. They moved a piece of legislation that the compensation was paid less. It wasn't subject to the PRSI or the USC.
It is extraordinary times. This is, an extraordinary natural disaster. Storm Éowyn, even looking back on the data, is of hurricane force. And time is of the essence. And if you were to compare it to, for example, the dairy or the beef industry, and if, beef farmers had rotting meat or rotting carcasses. And, the price of beef at the minute might be €7 kilo. But we heard at the forestry meeting the last night that traditionally, and statistics would show after a storm, the value of forestry can go down between 40 to 60%. I mean, if you thought the value of your litre of milk or, your kilo of beef was going to go down by 40 to 60% and it was rotten, in the beef factories or out the back, something would definitely be done then. And forestry is so important in us, number one, in all of the, I suppose, investment that was put into it by the forest owners maybe 25 years ago or so for whatever long-term needs that they wanted. And secondly, for our environmental and sustainability goals across Europe and in Ireland in particular. It would seem that probably not enough is being done very urgently or extraordinarily in this instance, as you've said already. I mean, the price of forestry is certainly going to go down. So what I'll ask you, Derek, is I'm a forest owner listening to this podcast. I might be on my own out in some rural area. I might have, a certain amount of land planted and a certain amount damaged. What was the message out of the meeting, and what's the best advice to give to that individual forest owner now? Is it to link up in something similar to what dairy does and beef in terms of a producer organisation type situation?
Yeah, I think one of the benefits, there was over 250 people at that meeting, and I suppose one of the most, what would you say, damning things out of that meeting is the fact that there was no department official there. I would say as Irish Forest Owners Organisation, we shouldn't have been holding that meeting. That should have been an initiative of government. We had to dig deep in our pockets to scarce resources to hold that meeting. However, 250 people did turn up. And the message that I would give those people is there is a sense of urgency, but certainly don't panic. I think what people got from that meeting, they realised that there was so many other people in the one boat. We had a company there that provided their services free of charge, 3 metrics. They were able to give them there and then satellite imagery before the day or two before the storm and the day or two after the storm, so they could see exactly the damage.
And I know the advice was not to panic, but God love them when you saw those maps going up on the screen showing red everywhere. Like, it was hard for them not to panic,
Not to
you know.
panic. Yeah. And it's a natural reaction. What we would find then is that there is a cohort of those people, as you quite correctly say, are in the older age group. They just don't have the heart to go back into it and probably won't. And we in the Irish Forest Owners, over the last number of years, would recognise that there is an ageing cohort of people in the forestry sector, and we're trying to manage succession planning. There's actually opportunities here for government, for example. If they give a planting grant, my son is coming on and I'm moving on as well. They could give him the planting grant on the basis that I would sign over my forestry to him. There is an opportunity, and you have to look for the opportunities in the situation. But again, it's that lack of, and I think I am critical of the department, and the piece that I'm missing with the department entirely is communication. It is the communication piece that's not there, and there is that little bit of a detachment going on. The forest industry is very valuable. I just paraphrase something. We have the 2023 to 2027 forest programme in place, and they preface that programme by saying that the financial commitment by government to the forestry programme 23 to 27 places forestry as the most important emerging industry in Ireland at this time, and its contribution to the environment and the economy can't be overstated. So step up to the plate, I would say, government. If you believe what you've wrote there, step up to the plate.
Well, that's the call on the government and on the various ministers within the Department of Agriculture. I know Minister Healy-Rae is meeting with the horticulture sector, organised meeting by a farm org, the Irish Farmers Association, later today. But in terms of any of those who maybe didn't make the public meeting last week, who are listening to this and they own forestry, let's give them some advice, Derek, as the next steps to take. Maybe, I think some of the messages were, talk to your neighbours who are forest owners as well. Maybe come together as a grouping to try and negotiate price, getting a harvester into that area. Maps, data is key as well. And I know the company that's working with Irish forest owners is 3 Metrics, a very innovative company, and fair play to them, are doing this at last minute notice, will help anyone that needs it to get their maps ASAP, because when you've data, you have a little bit of something to work with. Isn't that right, Derek?
Absolutely correct. And data is all important because by knowing what you have. If you can't measure it, you can't sell it. So you need to know what you have, what the scale of your problem is. Remember that the Irish forestry owners are an umbrella group for forestry producer groups, a network of them. There's 7 of them around the country. Some of them have fallen into lapse. The likes of the Sligo Leitrim kind of fell by the wayside. It's heartening to see the number of calls I've taken in the last couple of days where that's going to be up and running again. So look for your local forest owner groups. I'm also double as chair of the North East Forestry Group. We're probably one of the most successful forestry producer groups. We have over 120 members. So again, we can take anybody an umbrella. We're not territorial in the sense if someone from Leitrim wants to come in and get advice through us, absolutely no problem. We will be setting up the Sligo Leitrim forestry producer groups with the help of the North East. So we're right in the eye of the storm, excuse the pun, but we're right in the eye of it there with those 2 organisations. So reach out to them organisations. We have a very good resource there in Tagish, I have to say, and Tagish presented on the night as well. And use them. There's very, very good development officers there, and that's their job. So yeah, that's what you need to do, and we'll all learn from our neighbours for sure.
And the final question I have here, Derek, is that I've spoken to a number of landowners who have forestry over the last couple of weeks since January. Probably a bit before that as well, before the storm, for other reasons in terms of backlogs and delays. But it has put a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, forestry. And I know we're talking there about replanting and getting replanting grants. But the general feeling I'm getting, and this is just anecdotally now, but the general feeling I'm getting is that a lot of forest owners or farmers who went into forestry are just not enticed anymore. They've got a bad taste out of it. They haven't really felt that it has, provided what it was initially supposed to. And I'd say the ambition to have so many trees planted by 2030 could be rather optimistic, to be honest with you, with the feeling that's out there at the minute.
I think the success of the new forestry development plan will depend upon the result of government and how they respond to this crisis. That's for sure. I fielded a paper myself and my son, and we left it with the department, and we never heard a response from it since. But one of the proposals in that was that we would create a solidarity fund in the country. So all of those farmers that are disenfranchised, that will not go back into their land, give them a fair price for their land. They're even if it's trees on the ground, just as is. Let them walk away with a bit of dignity and finish out their days. Take that land and put it into a solidarity fund, not-for-profit fund. There's enough philanthropic money out there to fund that. I reckon 30-40 million go a long way to mopping up a good bit of land. You rehabilitate that land, get the trees off it, get it ready for replanting. There's a whole brigade of people that are shouting about hardwoods and native woodlands, and step up to the plate now and put a hand in their pocket and pay for that. If that's what they want, give it to them and use that land to do that and put as many trees as they want into native woodland if that's what they want. And that's a win-win for society. You could call it a mini NAMA, in the sense that what you're doing is you're putting the funds in there and hoping that 20 years from now that the value will have risen that fund and in the assets there that could be saleable again into whatever you want, or leave it as a solidarity fund. I just think that's an initiative that could work. I have been asking that question in industry for the last couple of weeks to see would any spare 30 or 40 million around. No one has stepped up to the plate just yet.
No. Well, it's certainly one of the ideas, absolutely, to bring to the table. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for on this week's episode of AgriFocus. Thank you once again to our guest today, Chair of Irish Forest Owners, Derek McCabe. Please rate and review this podcast to ensure we can continue making informative podcasts for you, our audience. And please do share it with anyone who you think might like to listen. Until next time, goodbye and take care.